We have arrived at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez in Mexico City for the running of the Mexican Grand Prix, the first time the race will be called the Mexican Grand Prix since 2019, after last season's race was known as the Mexico City Grand Prix. Coming into this week, 3 teams have been in the news this week. The first team news of the day comes from Haas, as they have announced that World Champ Car Championship contender and their current test driver Bartosz Kloss will return to the top class with the team in 2022. Bartosz is having an amazing season in World Champ Car, with him currently fighting for the title. He currently lies second in the World Champ Car Drivers' Championship, 34 points behind teammate Bruno de Barros, and his team Penske are currently leading the team's championship by 72 points ahead of Andretti Autosport. For the last few seasons, Bartosz has been having a redemption in his career after a disastrous 2016 season in the top class, with him having brilliant seasons in DTM and also currently having a brilliant season in World Champ Car, with him chasing down teammate Bruno de Barros in the standings. Bartosz previously raced for Haas back in 2015 when the team made their debut, and he will be looking to have a brilliant return to the top class at the same team he made his debut. This does mean now that at least one current Haas driver will be leaving the team at the end of the season. However, this was to be expected, given that Amelia Wilson put Alfa Romeo down as her first choice, which is behind Haas in the pick order. However, there is a chance that both of their current drivers could leave the team at the end of the season, with Daniel Fraser under pressure to perform after a disastrous second half of the season. If Daniel doesn't get retained, then there is a chance that former Manor driver Nicolas Zorbach, 2014 DTM champion and former top class driver Michael Mocho, 4-time race winner and former top class driver Robert Ionescu, and 5-time world champion Florian Volker could be there to capitalise and make their return to the top class in 2022. Only time will tell what direction Haas will go in. The second team news of the day comes from Williams, as they have announced that Welshman Jamie Griffiths will remain with the team for next season. Jamie has had a mixed season, with the last couple of races faring better for him. He currently lies 18th in the Drivers' Championship, tied for 17th with 2009 champion Mikael Skau, and his team Williams lie 10th in the Constructors, 5 points behind AlphaTauri. Jamie during the season has struggled compared to his teammate Felix Sontag. However, the last couple of races he has been fighting for points, with Malaysia being the most notable one, where at the same track he got his first ever podium last season. He finished 9th, which helped Williams in their fight with Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri and Haas for 8th in the Constructors' Championship. Jamie will be relieved to be retained by the team for another season, and he'll be looking to help the team again next season, especially when Williams go into a bit of a transitional period, with them switching to Lamborghini engines from next season. The final team news of the day comes from McLaren, as they have announced that 2-time world champion Joseph Willows will remain with the team for next season. Joseph has had a better season, much better than it was compared to last season when he first returned to the team. He currently lies 8th in the Drivers' Championship, 7 points behind Evan Byrne, and his team McLaren lie 5th in the Constructors, 13 points ahead of Lamborghini. Joseph's highest point of the season obviously came at Portugal, where after experiencing his first ever winless season in 2020, he returned to the top step of the podium after brilliant pace from his McLaren. In the last 2 races, Joseph has been challenging towards the podium, with him being robbed of a podium at Kota, thanks to him making an impromptu pit stop due to a mechanical issue. Joseph will be happy to know that he'll be staying with McLaren for next season, and he'll be hoping to steer the team in the right direction, with McLaren going through a transitional period as a result of them forming a partnership with German manufacturer BMW. And that is it for this week's edition of the GP4 OC News. The next team news will break at the Bahrain Grand Prix next week, who will be announced tuning to practice next Tuesday at the popular Bahrain International Circuit in Sakhir. Hello everybody and welcome to round 18 of the 2022 GP4 Offline Championship. We are here at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez in Mexico City for the Mexican Grand Prix. I am your commentator for the day, JW97, and I'm joined today by Franco Gamba.
Hello people, it's me. Yeah, we are here in Mexico and it's gonna be fun, I think. More than we realized, surely.
hopefully we can produce a better race here than what the real life lot did this past weekend. Although we'll have to wait and see how that one pans out. But of course, first time it is called the Mexican Grand Prix since 2019, because we had that thing in 2020 where, because we were still in the real life era, it was still called the Mexico City Grand Prix. Anyway, there's 3 test drivers in the car for anybody who is curious. All of them are booked. Two of them are overdue, and the other one was supposed to be booked for this one. You got Dennis Graff, who is in the Ferrari. This time as a book session instead of a requested session. You've got, and then the other 2 is of course Hento Sinanome for Renault and Ruslan Proxiuk for Alpha Tauri. Graf is in the car in place of Chris Chatfield. You have Hento Sinanome is in the car in place of Evan Byrne, and Ruslan Proxiuk is in the car in place of of David Kupok, I should say, not Miklos Gal, as Gal's actually ahead of Kupok in the championship. But anyway. We arrive here at Mexico City, coming off the back of quite a good race at USA, and a race which saw Amar Khan take a much-needed win last time out at USA.
In general, I will say that apart everything, Armor is doing even a miracle this season, and Mercedes getting wins is actually, let's say, very unexpected, considering how, first of all, precision testings went. And Armor is doing a serious miracles. And now it's putting him even in a closer contention for the championship, which is actually, I think, one sort of, let's say, Fernando Alonso in real life, 2012 season. You know, weaker car, battling for the title with basically the strongest.
Yeah, pretty much. And whether he can actually win his first world title this season is going to be interesting. It'll be interesting to see if he's got the pace compared to Gamba here as well, here at Mexico. And of course, you just put in the stream chat there, this race is probably going to get overshadowed by that WC race that we had yesterday. Well, it's got a little bit, I think the top class has got a lot of pressure on its hands to try and top that race that we saw yesterday in World Champ Car at Yehognam. If you haven't watched that race, go and watch it. It was... Me and Rob were literally breathless after that race. It was honestly unbelievable. Probably one of the best races I've ever commentated on, to be honest with you. It was that incredible. It was also in that race as well where it leads us on. It's kind of a nice segue, really. We talked about that race because the driver that won that race is actually returning to the top class next season. If you didn't see the news video earlier on, Bartosz Klos, after 6 seasons away, is returning to the top class in 2022 with the same team that he made his debut in 2015, that being Haas, of course. He has been the test driver, of course, this season for Haas, so it kind of made sense for him to get the move after what has been a very good season in World Champ Car. And it's fair to say the last few seasons he's had some relatively good seasons in DTM as well. And he's obviously hoping to come back with vengeance after what had been quite a tricky 2016 season.
I mean, in general, Bartosz has done a sort of reset and then a click that made his mentality stronger than ever, and he probably was hungry to get back in F1, and also probably doing it with a hat is a sort of redemption from what was the disappointment he had in 2015, where he drove probably the worst car on the grid, and at times he didn't have enough opportunity to prove actually his real speed. And I'm sure that next season he will bounce back quite in a good way.
Indeed, so it will be interesting to see how he does, considering he's been away from the top class since 2016, especially given the cars are a lot different to the ones he drove back in 2016, although he has had running in these types of cars, of course, because he was also the Ferrari test driver last season, and this season he, of course, became the Haas test driver. And it will be interesting to see how Klos does. Of course, the other 2 news that came out, of course, is that Griffiths and Willows will be retained at their respective teams. Griffiths staying at Williams for 2022, and Willows staying on at McLaren. I don't think that was really much of a surprise, to be honest, Franco.
Yeah, it was a matter of time. Gonna be honest, I never thought that, to be fair, Brandon Jackson, more than Agostino Bivona, would have actually replaced Joe Willows. Some part of the season Joe had some sort of struggles, But last few times he was actually quite fast, and also last race, yeah, it was a massive shame because he had a technical problem which robbed him of a possible podium finish, which would have been a back-to-back podium finish basically. So we hope that with BMW, McLaren will get more competitive as these last few races.
Indeed, so Willows has been on a little bit of form recently. These last two races, obviously, you could say he was arguably robbed of a podium last time out at USA, given he suffered a mechanical problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that Gamba has benefited from that, and he was lucky because of this.
Indeed,
because
so and it.
Vital points for him.
You were going to say, Franco? Sorry for interrupting.
Sorry, I was saying that probably has gifted vital points to Gamba.
Oh, okay. Well, he did reduce the pain a little bit thanks to that mechanical problem, to the point now where the gap between Gamba and Carr in the Drivers' Championship is now 17 points between them. It would have been 14 potentially if Willows didn't have that problem, but obviously it did happen, and it's ended up being 17 points instead of 14, which is what it could have been. But still, Carr still believes, even though after this race, he still believes it's going to be quite tough for him to still overhaul Gamba. Do you kind of agree with him on that one, or do you think he's trying to play it up a bit?
I think that everything can still happen, so I wouldn't be sure that it's actually over. At the same time, yeah, he said the same after Malaysia, and he actually won the last race. So, everything can happen still. So.
Indeed, yeah. And it will be fascinating to see how the rest of the season goes, of course. Now, usually at this point in the season, and I mentioned it last week as well, I normally ask you guys about what your predictions are for the remaining seats, and I might as well quiz Franco on that, seeing as he's here, because of course there are 6 seats left to be filled out for the top class in 2022. The 2 seats at Alfa Romeo, the 2 seats at Aston Martin, the remaining seat at Haas, and of course the remaining seat at Renault. So might as well. So if you want to, guys, on the stream chat, let us know your prediction on who you believe will get those remaining 6 seats. And so might as well ask you, Franco. Might as well quiz you on this. Who do you believe will get those final 6 seats? I will start off with Alfa Romeo. Who do you believe will get both of those seats? Because it is looking like it's going to be a new lineup next season.
I do think that, yeah, both drivers are quite surely leaving. I think they both will surely leave because they didn't even put them as under their choices. So I think, yes, we will have a whole new lineup. And it's a difficult situation for Alfa Romeo because there are various contenders. I think there are Amelia in the top class, Vance Waldinger, Alexander Arnold, also some outsiders which are, if I remember correctly, Robert Ionescu and Florian Bolker, right? These are... Yeah, so it's basically at the moment difficult. But if I will say one of the seats might be taken by Vance Waldinger, to be honest, as it stands. Because, yeah, Vance is currently doing quite well in Formula 2, and the last 3 seasons apart, yeah, disastrous. 2020 has done quite well in the past, so it might benefit from him. And also in the past, he was the test driver for Alfa Romeo, if I remember correctly, in 2019.
Was a test driver for Alfa Romeo, yes. I do believe it was actually, I think it might have actually been last season that he was the test driver actually for Alfa Romeo. So, because I think Curtis was the one who was the test driver in 2019 from memory. But, yeah, it will be interesting to see. So who do you think, so if you think Vance Waldinger is getting one of the seats, who do you think will be his teammate? Do you think it will be Wilson or do you think it will be someone else?
Well, it's a difficult situation. But at the end, I do think that if Emilia in these last 4 races that are remaining in the championship can perform one time quite well, she can get the seat. I have this feeling.
Okay, so for now you're going to go with Waldinger and Wilson then for Alfa Romeo. So that's that prediction. Aston Martin, they've also got 2 seats that need to be filled out. Now, of course, we are expecting at least one of them to be vacated because, of course, Julius Anderson is expected to leave the team at the end of the season, given he put another team down as his number 1 choice, that being Renault, of course, and they are obviously behind Aston Martin in the pick order. But it could be both seats because, as we've known for a bit, Roland Motrin isn't that secure, as you know, and it could be a chance that, like with Alfa Romeo, Aston Martin could have a brand new lineup in 2022. So, how do you see that one going with that team, Franco?
Well, it's a sort of particular situation in Aston Martin because, yeah, Roland is a serious risk, to be fair, because his season has been quite underwhelming. He hasn't actually delivered much special performances. Maybe Portimao and Malaysia were his highlight of the season, and then the rest of the season he was basically invisible. Sorry if I'm harsh, but yeah, basically invisible. And is I don't know where he's actually at a moment in the tiers, let's say, of the rankings. I don't actually have a good feeling about him, but who knows? Maybe he can deliver a strong performance that can save himself. Time will tell, of course. But at the moment, I'd say one of the strong contenders for Aston Martins might be from Formula 2 and is a championship contender. And basically, it has something in common with Aston Martin, and it is Aston Martins. So yeah, I'm talking about Jonathan Martins. I do think that he can actually be a contender for the seat, serious contender for the seat, because I think last season his debut in the OC in BTCC, if I remember correctly, right?
Yes, it was BTCC. You are correct on that.
In the last season, BTCC existed. I mean,
yeah, he was in that. So,
and if he finished like in top 10, if I remember correctly.
I believe it was 7th place he finished, from what I remember.
Well,
so it was around about that 7th and 8th place he finished, but it was still a decent season from him.
Yeah, I do think that he can be a contender for the seat because he's on the recently he's performing quite well, always close with his teammate Samet Toscan, and still a title contender. So I'd say he can get one of those seats if he keeps his form.
Okay, do you believe Roland Motrin will get retained then, or do you think he'll be booted out?
Well, it's a sort of mystery because Roland, when he performs well, he will deserve to be retained. But recently, he's performing one race and then he disappeared. So, as it stands, I do think that it will be someone else in place of Roland. And I do think that this someone else might be Aaron Curtis, even if his Formula 2 season isn't actually great at the moment. But I do think that he can actually snatch the one of the Aston Martin seats.
Of course, he did win the GP2 title last season, the Aaron Curtis. Only just missed out on a top-class seat for this season, of course. And he is, of course, the Aston Martin test driver, so I can see where you're coming from. So you're going to go with Curtis and Martins then for that occasion?
Yeah, even if there was also a possibility of Andrea Federi, but I don't think that Andrea Federi will stay in the top class, as I have this feeling. Because his performance is...
Fair enough. Of course, Federi is a contender for Aston Martin, and as we alluded to earlier on, he is obviously expected to leave Alfa Romeo at the end of the season, given he put Aston Martin as his first choice, which is behind Alfa Romeo in the pick order. So it will be interesting to see. It's definitely one that I think will be fascinating to see how that one goes, really. Obviously, 2 more seats left. One of them is, of course... the next one we'll look at is, of course, Haas. Now, obviously, today it was confirmed Bartosz Kloss would be returning to the top class with the team for 2022. So it does mean that at least one current driver will be leaving the team at the end of the season, which was, of course, to be expected, given that Amelia Wilson put another team down as her first choice. But could we see a chance that Daniel Fraser could get booted out, Franco? Do you think he'll get retained, or do you think somebody else will replace him?
Well, it's a strange situation because, let's say, if the situation was more quiet in general, and Daniel would have performed better, he would have probably get retained immediately. But he's not performing as expected, and yeah, as it stands, I have the feeling he might be booted out, and the one that might replace him is tough because there are a lot of contenders, which are, of course, being mentioned in the team news. So Zorbach, Mocho, Ionescu, and also Florian Volker. And of this, I'd say a strong contender might be, maybe Robert Ionescu more than anyone, and also Florian Volker as well might be there, but it depends by how the last races of their championship will go. So I don't think that these two are actually the main contenders for the seat. So Robert Ionescu and Florian Volker, and it will all be decided at the end of the season, of their season.
You're kind of 50-50 with those two then. Okay, fair enough.
Yes.
Finally then, we'll go on to Renault, of course. Now, obviously, Jesus Perinen is staying at the team for another season, so there's only one seat left, and it is possibly between Quag and Anderson, given that Byrne is, of course, moving back to Red Bull in 2022. So, as we speak right now, do you think it'll be Quag, or do you think it'll be Anderson?
Well, at a certain point of the season, I thought that it would have been tied. But as now the situation is going, I'd say Quag. Because, recently, in the last few races, Julius had a sort of crisis, which saw him doing a little bit of poor performances, and also a bit of erratic driving as well. If you remember Monza, he nearly killed Evan, crashing at Parabolica, which also costed him a penalty, a grid penalty for the race after in Korea. And it seems to be that the Julius to Renault meme is still going on, and will keep going on, maybe even after this silly season.
So you're going with Quag then to partner alongside Perinen. Okay, fair enough.
Yes.
So they are, of course, that's Franco's prediction, of course. Of course, you guys can leave your predictions in the stream chat, and you believe we'll get those remaining 6 seats. Of course, the 2 seats at Alfa Romeo, the 2 seats at Aston Martin, the remaining seat at Haas, and the remaining seat at Renault. Of course, 3 races to get them determined, and it should be interesting to see where that one goes, really. Anyway, whilst we've been talking, we do have, at the moment, the leaderboard, as you can see on the left-hand side. Currently, we have Chung at the top of the timing sheets by 43 thousandths of a second, ahead of Jake Galloway in second. The Renault test driver, Hento Sinonomi, is currently in third, with Perrin in fourth, Carr in fifth, with Vettel sixth, De Rosa seventh, followed by Willows in eighth, Roke in ninth, Garma in 10th, so only ninth and 10th for the 2 Red Bulls at the moment. Motrin is in 11th, with Wilson in 12th. Ferrari test driver, Dennis Graff is in 13th, with Lopez down in 14th, Verderi in 15th, Miklos Gal in 16th, with Daniel Fraser 17th, Jamie Griffiths is in 18th, followed by Felix Sontag 19th, Roman Quag is in 20th, with AlphaTauri test driver Ruslan Protsiuk in 21st, and Julius Anderson, who Franco just talked about a little bit earlier on, down in 22nd and last position. So far, the only driver in the pits at the moment. So, hey, that too now, because Willows has just joined him in the pits. So anyway, we move on. We might as well talk about a little bit with Red Bull at the last race at USA, because what happened with George Rogue, I mean, that's a race he'll want to forget, definitely, that's for sure. A misjudgment on his end, of course, a 10-second time penalty he received after the collision he caused with Rahul Patel, which took him out of the Grand Prix, and it was a bit of an unnecessary move, but it did cause a little bit of a concertina effect that happened afterwards.
Surely, I would say that George basically binned a strong possibility to win the race, because I think he was on a 3-stop strategy, And three-stop strategy looked quite better compared to the two-stop strategy. And it's a shame also for Raul, because it was going probably maybe to get a podium last race, but more for George, because he's desperate to get this win this season, and he's never getting the opportunity, or he's actually feeling the pressure when he's fighting for the win and do some silly mistakes like the one he did last race at Austin.
As we just see Roland Motrin there, one of George Roke's former teammate, making a bit of a blunder through into the stadium section there. A huge lockup for the Hungarian driver. For anybody wondering, the tyres we are using for this race is the white hard tyres. And since then, I think Yuri has put in a new rule stating that tyres will only be able to have a maximum of 3 races in a row. If it gets drawn out for a 4th consecutive time, then he will draw out another tyre compound, really. It's to avoid it being too repetitive, I'd say, in terms of tyres. Because we've seen the hard tyre quite prevalently in the last few races, as we've seen that George Roke has a bit of a moment going through into the SS there, a little bit of a lock-up through into that corner. Of course, it is the highest altitude on the calendar as well. I don't know if that gets represented too much on Grand Prix 4, but you can see that mistakes usually quite creep in around this track quite a lot. And with it being the hard tyres, I think we used these tyres last season, if I'm not mistaken. And, well, as we've seen so far throughout this season, the hard tyres, it's kind of a 50-50 lottery in terms of how well they will do in terms of degradation, really. And most of the time, it's not really a degrading tyre as such sometimes. It kind of depends on what wear weight gets drawn out for every race. And, well, given the type of track that we're at, especially seeing as at times it can be a bit of a hard track to overtake sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes it can be. Who knows, really? Could this be a bit of a slugfest? Who knows?
I don't know, to be honest. But yeah, I think that we'll have a fast car in the straight, and we'll have at one stop probably we'll breathe good air, because yeah, I think that it will be quite difficult here to do overtakes in general. It won't be probably boring as in real life, but yeah, I don't think it will provide too much action during the whole race. Maybe at the start there will be some sort of mess, as it was used to be last few seasons.
Indeed, and we'll have to wait and see how that one sort of develops, really, in terms of tomorrow's race, because it will definitely be one to keep an eye on during the 71-lap Grand Prix here in Mexico, of course. Of course, last season when we last came here, this was the scene of, to date, Miklos Gal's last victory in the top class. To date it is, of course, because he could still get one in the future. You never know, of course. He could turn AlphaTauri around in the future, of course. But yeah, this was obviously where he took his last win of 2020 here last season, and we had Joseph Willows who came close to possibly getting the victory, but again, tyres just seemingly playing a part in him not being able to grab the victory. As we look at Loa Chung, who's currently top of the sessions, just going around the double right-hander there then. And for Loa Chung, well, it's been a case of bad luck for her in these last couple of races, it's fair to say. Another retirement at USA, and so much so because of the Lamborghini's double retirement, Franco, it's meant that McLaren have leapfrogged them in the Constructors' Championship. They're now 13 points ahead of them as a result.
Yeah, I mean, Raul has been, and also Laura as well, but more Raul was actually very unlucky these last few races, because I think that in Malaysia he would have probably gotten maybe a top 5 judging his strategy, but he was taken out too early in the race by Jake Galloway, and there's 10 points probably gone for them. Also, Austin, of course, which recently happened, and they're probably, podium, I think so, another 18 points. So yeah, it's a massive shame, because this is actually not the real position where Lamborghini would deserve to be, because they had quite a lot of bad luck recently. So I would say they wouldn't be with Ferrari, but they would be close with McLaren in general. Now they are 13 points behind. But if we actually had these 28 points, yeah, they will be ahead of McLaren, but just a little bit, so it will be actually as it should be in general.
Indeed, and obviously the last two races is the ones that Lamborghini will want to forget about, and we're looking to see if they can leap back in front of McLaren before the within these last four races of the season. Of course, we've got Mexico this week, and then of course Bahrain is next week. For anybody who needs a reminder, of course, Bahrain has been moved back to later on in the season from this season, of course, and it will be the same case next season as well, because it will once again be round 19. And then of course you've got Abu Dhabi and Brazil. It will be the last two races. Whilst Franco was talking there, I noticed that Griffiths actually set a purple first sector, in fact, but then lost time in the middle sector. So he seems to have got a very good car down that straight so far. Maybe something to keep an eye on during qualifying, perhaps, Franco.
I do think that who have strong car in the straights will have sort of advantage in the first sector, especially. I don't know the whole lap, but in the first sector they will be pretty fast. So as we are now, as we have now seen with Jamie Griffiths, it will be probably the same with think Mercedes powered cars are the fastest. I don't know actually the speed trap of all cars. I think that Honda is the slowest, surely.
It could depend really on how streamlined it is down the straight as well, depending on how Jamie has set it up for this practice session. Something possibly to keep an eye on during qualifying. And speaking of Williams, I think that's his teammate Sontag potentially being overtaken by Willows there quite soon. As Patel, meanwhile, gets up into sixth position in the Lamborghini. So speaking of Lamborghinis, Chong is about to finish her lap, but it looks like she's not going to improve on her fastest time at the moment, which is a 1 minute 16.773. And no, she doesn't. She stays where she is for the moment. So the top three currently separated by 46 thousandths of a second, including the Renault test driver Hento Sinanome, who has had well, I would say recently has had some good pace in F2 the last couple of races. It's just a bit of a shame, really, what happened to him at his home race when he was involved in a collision at the bus stop chicane. Really, it was the only one I think that happened at the bus stop chicane, actually. So compared to Formula E, I think that gives that version of Fuji a bit of a good advertisement. But anyway, it was a bit of a shame, really. But Sinanome clearly was supposed to do this at Malaysia, of course, but due to some issues with the way that Yui set up the performance files, basically, it meant that he's had to do it here in Mexico instead, when there's no Formula 2 action, instead of where we were supposed to have it, which was at Malaysia. But enough about that, of course. Obviously, this is the last race where we'll see booked test drivers, and it's possibly for the last time as well, because there's obviously been some consideration by Yuri to potentially just have them as just reserve drivers in 2022 and only have them as requested instead of booked sessions, because it has been a little bit of a nightmare for him to set it up, really. But yeah, obviously we'll get that official. I mean, I think it's looking like it's going in that direction, but I think we'll officially know about it with the discussion stream coming up. I think more will be detailed about that one anyway, what will be done with the test drivers in 2022. But anyway, back to the action. Willows is coming into the pits this time by, and it was Felix Sontag that he was getting held up by, because you can see Griffiths is actually coming up towards the stadium section at this point in time. And just looking around, of course, Jesus Perino, we might as well talk about him. We haven't talked about him throughout this, of course. Another good race for him at USA, another podium for him. He's been on a run of very good races recently, even though his qualifying has not been anything to note about. His race pace has definitely been brilliant. And, well, he's been doing very well. 11 podiums, I think it has been this season for him, but still yet to get that first victory, Franco.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus has done quite well all season, and of course, it's impressive that he has actually gotten 11 podiums. I did not knew that. It's actually impressive, even more impressive. It's a shame that he never got a win, but I'm sure that in one of those last 4 races, hope it won't reveal to be a jinx. But I do think that he can get a win. I have this feeling.
Just going to double check if it's actually 11. It's actually 10 podiums. He's actually one off from 11, but it's still double-figure podium. It's pretty good for his rookie season. And but yeah, still not able to get the victory yet, as Gamba has a bit of a moment through into the S's there whilst he was up on his personal best. But yeah, pretty good first season for Perinin so far.
Yeah, I mean, third place with a car that is so unreliable in general. It's fast, but he's doing very well. I mean, in general, the gap between, for example, him and Evan Byrne is not true, because we know Evan has been actually has actually done a season with all problems. But actually, I do think that him and Devon are very similar performance, on pure performance meant. So it's basically impressive from him, and also the fact that I expect this, to be honest, from a guy that has won BDCC in his first season and actually won the team championship on a single car, and also last season in Formula 2 where he finished in 4th place, if I remember correctly. So
yeah, he was fourth.
He's a sort of, let's say, Charles Leclerc of the OC.
Oh, whether he can live up to Charles Leclerc is another thing. I mean, given that so far this season Renault have been there's been a question in terms of their strategy department this season. You might be on to something there, Franco. But the only difference is Hazes hasn't had a victory yet, whereas in real life Charles Leclerc has. In fact, 3 wins to be exact this season. But anyway, back to the action and back to the OC, as we just see one of the Mercedes there getting by on Romain Quart going into the first corner there, and one that we mentioned about the concertina effect that happened earlier on at the US Grand Prix, which was started by Roque. Obviously, a few cars concertinaed into the back, one of them being Kirishima De Rosa, another one being Romain Quart, and for some people that was a little bit of a shame, really, because they thought for a moment we were going to see an Alfa Romeo lead the Grand Prix, but just wasn't the case, really. But for Alfa Romeo, despite having a very strong weekend at USA, where they qualified very high up on the grid, Quag in 3rd and Federi in 5th, and were looking like they could get a strong result. It went in the bin, really. Quag, who damaged his front wing earlier on when it could have looked like he could have taken the lead, but had to pit for repairs, and then later on retired thanks to a mechanical failure. And then later on, Federi, who was looking good for some points, also retired with a mechanical failure. It's really been the story of Alfa Romeo this season, hasn't it? They've had a very decent car this season, probably the best in the midfield, but they just can't seem to deliver it, and hence why they're quite low down in the Constructors' Championship.
I'd say best in the midfield is a bit of a statement, but I'd say best of the midfield back marker pack, yes, surely. Last race it was my fault, because I say the Alfa Romeo 1-2 incoming, and all of a sudden, boom, they had problems everywhere. But that's a sort of shame, because Alfa Romeo lost, like, I don't know, if I count the points Alfa Romeo lost, probably they will be ahead of Aston Martin. But actually they are in 8th, and even AlphaTauri is close with them, so that is a sort of disappointing season from Alfa Romeo, but not that the drivers themselves are doing bad. A little bit, but I'll come with it later. But it's just that the drivers had bad luck in the wrong moments. Like last race, I think that Romain and Andrea would have probably gotten both points. Probably. Now I don't remember the strategy, but I'm sure that they would have probably had the chance to get a both point finish. And across all the season, I'd say, both of them has done some of dark periods. Like in Federi at the start of the season was disappointing, and then all of a sudden he started to perform well. Then he was unlucky because he was taking out various races where he was in good positions, especially at Silverstone, where he was going to get a podium, but in the last lap Franco decided to do a sort of kamikaze on him and taking him out of the podium. And it's the same with Romain, because it started well the season and then it disappeared. and reappeared last few races. But it's basically a difficult season to judge for Alfa Romeo. But in general, it's one of the season that is a what if, I would say.
Yeah, I think it has been a bit of a what if for Alfa Romeo this season. The car is a lot better than where it is in the constructors, it's fair to say. And I'd argue they have a better car than Aston Martin, but it's just haven't got the results. And as a result, you mentioned it earlier, you've even got the likes of AlphaTauri not far behind them. Even Williams and Haas are not far behind them either. It just shows how much poor luck Alfa Romeo have had this season, really. And it to the point where instead of fighting with Aston Martin for 7th, they're fighting with AlphaTauri, Williams, and Haas. 3 cars, the teams that you wouldn't be expecting, especially with that Alfa Romeo. Cars that you would expect that Alfa Romeo to fight with. It's a bit of a, like you said, a what if for him, really. And definitely they'll want to forget about this season, that's for sure. Move on to 2022, where it is obviously looking like they're going to have a new lineup. As we've just been speaking, Jesus Perinen has now just gone to the top of the timing sheets with a 1 minute 16.639. It was Laura Chung's teammate, Rahul Patel, who's up on his personal best in the middle sector. So let's see where he's going to emerge after this lap. He's currently in 7th place, and across the line he will go now then, and he goes up into 5th position, slots in front of Amar Kar, who is looking to try and gain some more points on Franco Gamba this week. Speaking of Kar, he does improve, but he remains in 6th position, not able to get back in front of Patel as a result, as Patel makes his way through into the first few corners there. Anyway, so with just under 5 minutes to go, as Willows has a big lockup going through into the stadium section there, this is what the leaderboard looks like. It's Perinen at the top with Chung in 2nd, Galloway in 3rd, Sinanome, the Renault test driver, in 4th, Patel in 5th, Carr in 6th with Lopez in 7th, De Rosa in 8th, Roque in 9th, Griffiths in 10th position, Willows 11th, Gamba in 12th with Motrin in 13th, Wilson in 14th, Graf in 15th, Anderson in 16th, Verderi 17th, Gall in 18th, Quark 19th, Fraser in 20th, Sontag 21st, and Protsu, the only driver a second off, in 22nd position. As we have just over 4 minutes to go before practice comes to an end, as we are before we get on to qualifying for the Mexican Grand Prix, as Patel now coming through the stadium section right now then, as he'll be finishing his lap. Doesn't look like he's going to be up on his personal best, but you never know, he might pull a miracle off in at the last sector, as he now crosses the line. I don't think he's going to improve, and no, he doesn't. He stays where he is for the time being, as we only around looks like cars improved meanwhile, but he stays in 6th position. I was just going to say that 6 cars are still in the pit lane as we speak. As Daniel Fraser, here he is in the Haas, of course. We talked about it earlier, as Protsuit now ensures that the whole pack is now under a second between each other, as he just improved there but stayed in 22nd, as Patel's up in the 1st sector until he locks up there into the chicane. But yeah, we were just looking at Fraser there, and once again interrupted because Perinen has just improved on his fastest time of a 1:16.613 now, the Spaniard goes on. But yeah, it was a bit of a decent weekend at the US Grand Prix for Daniel Fraser. He was looking pretty strong, of course. Finished in 13th, which is probably where you would expect the Haas to be, around there. But he really needs to put in those performances, Franco, because as said, like with Roland Motrin, he is a man under pressure.
I think that in general, if he would perform like this, then yeah, he will be fine, even if the performance wasn't something special, but it was what Haas actually expects. So, or you expect in general, because we are not the Haas team manager. So yeah, in general, it is where Haas usually is expected to be. So if he performs like these last 3 races, because of course Brazil is where everything is decided, so it's basically till Abu Dhabi that you have time to perform quite well. He can actually snatch the seat at the last second, like it was maybe last season. And as for Roland, yeah, he needs to do the same. I think it's so strange that he performs one time well, and then again it disappears. It's it does one-offs, let's say, and this is actually putting him in danger.
Yeah, indeed, and of course, once again, Fraser finding himself in a similar position to what he did last season. We're going to ride on board now with the drivers for the remainder of the session because we've not got that long to go, as we just saw a couple of people there heading back into pit lane. Speaking of Fraser, we're running on board with him right now as he just makes his way around the final turn. Might get 2 more laps in unless he gets the pit indicator on the top of your screen on the def panel. Fraser crosses the line, no improvement, it stays where he is. Same goes for Mikolas Gal, who's just crossed the line himself. Garber coming up behind, I think that's Wilson in front. Wilson didn't improve and nor did Garber on that occasion. Lopez getting it possibly at least 2 more laps in. Same goes for Roland Motrin behind. Here comes Rahul Patel now then in the Lamborghini as he now just makes his way onto the pit straight now then. And the Indian driver crosses the line and does not improve. He stays where he is, as Quarg will get 1 more lap in before the session comes to a close. Here is the AlphaTauri test driver, Ruslan Protsiuk, as he now makes his way through into the final 2 turns. Hasn't exactly been the best of seasons for him this season in F2, mainly due to a lot of bad luck he's had throughout the season, especially what happened in Fuji last time out, and a lot lower than I think he would be, than what he should be, given we know how quick he is. But Ruslan didn't improve on that occasion. He stays down in last, and because of Perin's improving, it means now that Sontag and Protsiuk are the only 2 drivers to be outside, to be over a second behind the man at the top, which is the guy we're on board with, who doesn't improve, that being Jesus Perinen. Kiyoshima DeRosa on an improvement, he goes up to 3rd, so a big improvement there towards the end of the session. Videri across the line, no improvement for him. Joseph Willows makes his way onto the pit straight now then in the second of the 2 McLarens, but he's not going to improve and he stays in 11th position. The Renault test driver of Hento Tsunoda, currently in 5th, he's had a pretty good session, it's fair to say, has the Japanese driver, and I think if I'm not mistaken, apart from when we had Takuma Sato and that lot in the early years of the OC, I think he is the first Japanese driver to compete in a practice session in the top class and having a very good session up in 5th position. Daniel Fraser now then coming around at the final turn and making his way onto the pit straight. Cross the line he will go, and he does not improve. Same goes for Gal. Wilson will cross the line. I don't think she's going to improve, and no, she doesn't, but we'll get 1 more lap anyway. 8, 7, 6, not yet. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And 0, and the checkered flag is out. That is the end of the session. Who was the last to cross the line? I didn't actually quite catch it. It was Motrin who crossed the line last, so we'll keep an eye on him. He will be the one to keep an eye on. Quarg now then, coming up behind Motrin's teammate, in fact, Julius Anderson, the 2 guys fighting for the second Renault seat. No improvement for Quarg. I wonder if he made a mistake, because he was around 3 seconds off of Perinen that time by on his one and only lap after being in the pits for a little bit. Here is Perinen, who is at the top of the timing sheets now then, just coming around the final 2 turns on the racetrack. The Spaniard now then through the final turn and onto the pit straight now then. He will go, and Perinen will now cross the line in the Renault, and he does not improve. He stays where he is. De Rosa on another improvement. Can he improve? And no, he can't. Loses time in the last sector and remains in 3rd position. Andre Videri, meanwhile, currently in 17th position, and he stays 17th as a result. Willows in the 2nd McLaren, just making his way onto the pit straight, and across the line he will go, and he stays where he is. Hento Tsunoda now then, as mentioned, a good day's running for the Japanese driver. Tsunoda coming around the final turn, making his way onto the pit straight, and across the line he will go, and he does not improve and stays where he is. Griffiths, obviously he's going to be retained by Williams for next season, so Williams retaining their lineup when they switch to Lamborghini engines for next season. Griffiths across the line, and he does not improve. Fraser, across the line he will go. He's currently in 20th. It looks like he's going to stay in 20th, and he does. Gal stays where he is. Wilson, across the line, she will go in the Haas. Gamba doesn't improve. Lopez doesn't improve. Motrin, the last driver to cross the line. Let's see what he can do. I don't think he's going to improve. Motrin across the line, and he stays in 13th. But that's practice done with Perin in top, Chung in 2nd, and De Rosa in 3rd. What did you make of that session, Franco?
I'd say that, in general, Renault, by the looks of it, looks strong as a Lamborghini as well. And I'd say that, yeah, Mercedes is okay. Yes, they're both in the top 10. And I'd say that Red Bull is quite strongly. But I say that it's most because of the bad straight line that Honda engine have in the straights. So, yeah, it will be quite tough for them in qualifying, I think.
Well, we will see, of course. Well, we're just going to take a brief pause for a moment, and then we'll be back with a fresh stream for the qualifying session here at Mexico. But in the meantime, I've been JDwayne97, he's been Franco Gamba, and we'll see you in just a little bit. See you in a bit.